and I'm assuming that Peg and Marie will join us shortly. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. I don't know if that triggers anything with Channel 18 or not. I assume we're going to be recorded. And I still haven't read up on all of the formalities. The public is permitted to attend.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, the public is invited to participate. I believe we have to identify the board members now and also upon any vote. So I'm the chair, David. And the others?
Deborah Miller. Janet Cassidy.
Paul
And
Doan.
Sandy, I didn't hear you, so could you say it again?
What?
Okay, so Deb Miller, Janet Cassidy, Sandy Hall, and myself, and we're waiting for one more member. The first item on the agenda is public comment. And I know you're all here for specific items, so there'll be plenty of opportunity for comment during those items. Good morning, Linda. We've just started. We're in the public comment section. We will proceed to the rest of the agenda. Giving you
Thank
1,
you.
2, 3, and here we go. Approval of minutes.
There's a lot of interference noise.
I'm sorry, say that again.
There's a lot of interference noise.
One thing we can do is mute and then unmute when we're ready to speak. So
That's a
let's
good
try that. So why doesn't everybody mute? I guess I'm not going to. Okay. So when you're ready to speak, just unmute and we'll go from there. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of December 16th, 2020?
I so move.
Janet Cassidy moves. Is there a second?
I second.
Was that you, Deb?
Yes.
Okay, Deb Miller seconds. Any discussion? Good morning, Peg.
Hi there.
Any changes, any corrections? If not, we have a motion to approve and a second. I'm going to go through names one by one on any vote today. All those in favor, Deb? Yes or no?
Yes.
Janet?
Yes.
Peg?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes too. The minutes are approved. We are up to the landscaping project. Paul has been doing a lot of work on this already, and I would like to let him take it away. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the commission for opportunity to appear this morning. As some of you know, I did meet with the commission back in the fall, and at that time I was in the very preliminary stages of thinking about the project and had some general ideas, and have continued to talk to a lot of people in the town, people involved in the landscaping business, people involved in the tree growing and care for tree business, landscape design people, and so forth. And through that effort, and then also efforts involving people who are involved and very interested in the Kroll as a person and as a basically as the person that began the concept of decorative decoys. I've talked to people who are in the decoy area and investors, collectors, carvers, so forth. And The genesis, I guess, for this idea, for some of the background here, I've been involved kind of passively with the Historical Society lately. I used to be, of course, its president. My mother was the president long before I was president. And through the years, the society has been of interest. Of late, my activity on it has been very limited, other than having managed the investment portfolio for them, a gift of Matthias Payne back in the 90s, actually late 1980 period. He gifted some property which was sold, and that resulted in some funds, approximately $100,000 was cleared from the sale of the land. And I've been involved in investing that money for the society's benefit. And they use that endowment for supporting certain activities during their annual operating budget. And the fund is there for other purposes as well. But that's been pretty much the limit of my involvement, which has been a constant involvement for the last 30 odd years. Today, by the way, that fund is approximately $500,000 worth, and provides a nice backstop for anything the society needs in terms of operational fill-in that isn't generated through their normal fundraising efforts. In addition, I've tried to, since I've stopped working, be a little more involved, and offered to serve if there was some role there, but at least for the past 2 or 3 years have served as a docent at the Kroll Barn, except for last year, which was kind of interrupted because of COVID and concerns about the effect of that. So, but one of the things that I noticed while serving there, one is, of course, the lack of activity. It's fairly slow day to day. And I think efforts are obviously being made to improve that, and I appreciate and applaud all of those efforts. Second thing that one notices when working there is that it's getting warmer and warmer in our summers, and particularly at the Kroll Barn, which was the victim of, as it was the whole Brooks Academy site, as you're well aware, of the devastation that resulted from the tornado back in July of 2019. And since then, the area has remained sort of, it was cleared, of course, of most of the trees that had fallen, but it remains basically a very scorched earth kind of setting there. It's denuded of all foliage that used to exist there. And I provided a couple of items to address today's meeting. I assume that was sent out, but one of them happened to be a picture I had from the Google map that showed the site of the Brooks Academy prior to the devastation, because most of us today have already forgotten of what things were like just a year and a half ago. But that shows a tremendous amount of greenery and foliage, canopy, however you want to phrase it, but basically an area that provided a great deal of shade and comfort and beauty to the area that's been lost. And as a docent there in the barn and sort of putting through some time during the afternoons and so forth when the museum is open, it gets stifling hot in that, and it's largely because the tree cover has been greatly reduced to non-existence. So rather than just sort of sit idle and let the thing kind of run its course and just adjust more and more and of the belief that it's only going to get worse in terms of summer heat and dryness with climate change and various fallout from that event. I decided to begin looking at different things that could be done, and one of them was to, I thought, both approach the lack of foliage that used to exist there, as well as maybe even make the site a more appealing site to travelers, to visitors, to potential patrons of the museum. I began developing an idea to bring back what was lost there and maybe actually enhance the area with the hope of accommodating. I mean, when you think of museums around the town, around this Cape, I don't know many of them that look as desolate and as uninviting as does the Kroll Barn. And for people who are knowledgeable about the decoy industry and the whole process of carving, this is really the mecca of bird carving. And for people who follow that, invest in it, collect them, whatever, this is an important resource that the town has, and it could really, I think, take full advantage of that in many ways that it is now struggles, because basically the site has become quite unappealing to passers-by and so forth. So anyway, before you, or at least I think you've seen the outline of the plan, I spent monies personally to have a fellow, Rocky Clark, who I met with, one of several landscape people that I've met with. I asked him to put together, because he has the capability of drawing colors and schemes and that sort of thing. He took basically the scheme that I had developed, and as a result of talking with a lot of people, and that's the plan that is before you, I believe. And I'd be happy to go through that in whatever level of detail. I plan to talk with the Historical Society, which I've kind of kept in touch, obviously stayed close with both your commission through David and the society, in talking with its president, Peggy, who's on the commission here. And I've kept them both involved of events and activities and developments as they've been unfolding. One thing that was done this fall, the winter time, January actually, was the preliminary clearing of just the old undergrowth, the brush, the removal of the fallen trees, the dead and decaying trees that were in the property. I asked Link town to participate, and he very willingly offered his services. And of course, I had been in touch with the society and the commission in advance of that. That work has been largely done. My wife and I were up there more than several days, breaking and clearing and at least putting some of the things in piles with the idea that the town could come by and pick them up. There was an old bench that had been out back that needed to be removed, and that was removed. And the town has removed some of the piles. There are still some there, but basically the site has been tidied up a bit, but obviously more needs to be done. But again, for people, when stuff is, when trees are knocked down, as in the tornado, or when the town clears areas, it's kind of quickly we forget what the site looked like previously. And so I had pictures of it before and after, and I admit that things are kind of desolate there, but they're much better than they had been, at least in terms of a lot of dead and fallen trees and the undergrowth that had brambles and briars and so forth. So one thought was to appear before, and I asked to sort of come before the the Historical Society, but then I had to end up going to Boston for some medical tests the same day of the meeting, so I wasn't able to attend that meeting. And I'm hoping to do that at some later time when it's convenient for the society. But I had worked up a set of plans and some accompanying narrative, which sort of breaks the project into 4 different phases based upon the general order that one would like to proceed, and that comes from having talked to a lot of people in this process. And it also sort of divides the project up into manageable both work and cost ranges or whatever. So that depending upon the ability to generate funds, one can proceed from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, and if one's successful in generating a sufficient level of donations and so forth, support from corporate and private people, then the project in its entirety would be completed. But it more or less at this point can consist of various levels of improvements. So I provided for you an outline of that phased work plan, and some sort of hypothetical dates, target dates that this work would occur, assuming I'm able to raise the funds that need to be raised. Now, I did offer, in talking with Linda at the society's treasurer, I did offer to, initially I had 2 upfront sort of costs that I think need to be done preliminarily. One was the cost of preparing the plans that one can take to organizations such as yourself or others and potential donors. I offered to pay for that. And the second cost is the cost of potentially placing a deposit with the Johnson Tree Farm in terms of them holding the trees for the time period at which we hope to have them placed on the site and properly prepared and so forth. Those 2 items total around $2,000. And my thought was to offer, I would give a check to the Historical Society, because it's important for me to take advantage of the society's tax deductibility in terms of charitable contributions of potential donors. And I talked with Linda about this, and we'd kind of worked out a plan that she seemed to be in agreement with. One, to accept any dedicated funds from contributions could be set aside, expressly used for the Kroll Barn Landscape Project through the society. And in addition, I was more than willing to give the society a check for a couple $1,000s, undated, with the idea of maybe initially I could use funds from that Bethia Payne Fund that I had mentioned earlier that the society has to cover the upfront costs until I could actively get in touch with people and start raising money. And if in fact I wasn't able to raise 1 cent, then the society could cash my check and these preliminary costs would be covered. And so the society isn't going to be out 1 cent under that project. And so hopefully that's still a possibility. In the meantime, though, with timing and things moving and my inability to get to the society because of the hospital visit, I've gone ahead and paid for the cost of the preparation of the plans. So I won't bore you any further with the details, but I could sort of summarize. One thing I did want to point out, which I stressed in the work plan, is that Elmer Kroll, Anthony Elmer Kroll, was born in 1862, December 5th. And 2022, therefore, is the 160th anniversary of his birth. And that was the date that I thought might be conveniently used as a target for the full completion of the project, which would be the fall of 2022. So I'm hoping to start raising money when I return in the spring, and hopefully begin the next step, the sort of completion of phase 1, and as funds, if I'm successful, which I expect to be, the phases would continue as indicated. I've also talked with people like Ted Harmon, one of the Cape's major bird carving supporters, very much into the auction and the appraisal sort of decoys and so forth business. And also a gentleman whose grandfather was a client of Elmer Kroll's, a fellow by the name of Matt Cunningham he lives in Colorado, but he summers on the Cape and in college. And he's very interested in working with and bringing along the 4 or 5 auction houses in New England and the East Coast that are very much interested in the Kroll legacy and the Kroll barn as a resource and a promotion of it as a museum, and has offered, and we've talked phone-wise about steps that might be taken in terms of gaining the support of auction houses and so forth to provide a potential continuing source of funding in support of some of the ongoing costs to maintaining or helping to maintain the museum bond structure itself. So that's kind of where we stand. I'll be happy to try to respond to any questions, or if you want me to summarize the phases, I'd be happy to do that. They're in front of you, I assume, and I don't want to go over plowed ground, so to speak.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'd like to open it up in just a minute, but I do have a couple of preliminary comments. First, I want to thank Paul very much for taking this on. My belief in local government, or in just about anything, is that we can get so entrenched in bureaucracies and committees that sometimes nothing happens at all. So when somebody takes an initiative, I think that's half the battle, and I applaud Paul's efforts to do so.
Thank you very much, David.
I was also involved in the original reconstruction of the sorry about that, of the Elmer Kroll barn. And one of the conversations that we had at the time, and I was involved, and Jeremy Gingras was involved, and for the town, I think the main contact at the time was Chris Nickerson of the Highway Department, who said clairvoyantly, you should take all these trees down. They're of a variety that once you start clearing, they're not a strong tree, and the rest of them are going to come down. So I didn't want the Kroll barn to look like there was nothing on it. So I was one of the guilty parties who said, let's just keep those trees up for a while, and we know what happened. So those trees have now come down. It absolutely would be desirable to plant something else, and I hope we do move in that direction. What is the role of this commission? I think that we're not, obviously funds have to be raised we have enough building needs, so we and our recommendations to the town are not likely to go in the direction of fundraising for this project. And I think Paul is already aware of that. I do believe we have the responsibility of approving a plan. So I think we have to decide if the plan is presented by Paul is acceptable, and we have to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, which can choose either to say it can be handled administratively, or it can be handled on consent agenda, or to give it a full review if they want to stick their nose into it as well. But regardless of what the Board of Selectmen decides to do or not, I think it is our role to approve either this plan by Paul or make adjustments and to go forward with our recommendation. My only concern is that in terms of tree placement and possibly wall placement, you know, my efforts have been focused on the building, but I've also for some time now had this feeling that the parking lot is terribly organized right now and could be improved very simply by changing the circulation flow to an aisle, a single parking aisle, parallel to parallel street, and perhaps lengthened just a bit to the west, not very far, about 2 spaces worth, closer to the Crowell barn. That would allow a single aisle with parking on both sides, and it would also allow land to be reclaimed to the north of the parking lot that could be used for additional farmers market slots or so forth. The only thing in Paul's plan is I want to make sure it doesn't preclude any of those options. So I might bicker just a very small amount with one tree placement and the wall placement. But I think there's plenty of time to get into that. I don't think we can approve a final plan today, but I think we can raise any issues that anybody has and go from there. So with that, does anybody want to jump in? If not, I'll put the spotlight on certain of you, but who would like to ask questions or make comments? And just jump right in.
I had one question. Am I on mute? Can you hear me?
Sorry, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I have one question about the irrigation, since you know, we've been tending the gardens over there, and for years and years we did it with a hose. And last year we were the delighted recipients of a free irrigation system donated by some very generous people. So when I noticed something in there about the trees at first having to be watered by hand, and I figured that would probably end up as our responsibility. So I'm just curious about whether the irrigation system that you plan for the lawn will be able to be used or siphoned off some water for the trees. You know, that would have to be heavy on the single plant.
Sally, that I should say, I mean, there's a lot that I've done. I didn't want to bore people too much with a lot of details, and so hopefully through some of these questions, other facts will come out of some of the steps that are taken. First, with respect to David's comment about the Selectman's office and their support, I have talked with Joe Powers. He was very supportive. Joe said, you know, he had been on the job 2 months to the day when the tornado hit, and he was called up to the school because the word was that people were trapped with the fallen trees at the elementary school. And so he had grabbed somebody and they rushed up to the through the center toward the elementary school. When they ran into at the Brooks Academy, just a total devastation all along Parallel Street. So he said, I can't do any more than let you know how critical his feelings were positively placed of the need to take steps to regain some of the beauty of that area that got totally lost. I did have a phone call unsolicited from Larry Ballantyne in the Selectman's office the other day, also indicating that he hoped that I could speak with David, which just because I told him I've been in touch with the commission and kept David informed. And also he urged that we connect with Joe Powers, which I reported to him. I've already taken that step. And he offered to provide whatever support he could from his position as chair of the Board of Selectmen. With respect to the water and the flowers and the garden club, I talked with the president of the club back in this fall, and at the time, not to get into a lot of old war stories or replowed, going over plowed ground here, but my family had supported the creation of that garden at Exchange Park in memory of my brother who was killed in the service. And my mother, and then later I financially supported the garden club as a way of trying to maintain the efforts that the garden club devotes to all of the town gardens, expressly that particular one, which has a small plaque up there in memory of my brother. And I talked with the president about renewing that commitment because it had sort of fallen aside, and I didn't even know if Stephen's plaque was still there in the garden, but I found it and so forth. And so I pledged some money to the garden club last year in support of their continued work at the garden, and mentioned at the time my thoughts about early on about this site. And I know the garden club, and Sally can speak to this, but I know the garden club is way overextended with the work that's demanded of them. And I am appreciative of that. And the last thing I want to do is create new burdens. But if efforts can be found financially or through volunteers, I'm hoping that some combination of volunteer help and financial support, additional financial support to the garden club might help to provide what support and advice and guidance they would provide. I've talked with Nancy Jones, a member of the garden club, on a couple of occasions, and Nancy was kind enough to take my plan to the president, who at the time, just to kind of bring her up to date on things, at the time, and she was recovering and was ill from a COVID vaccination reaction, I guess. So it wasn't the best time to try to do this, but my sense was we'll come back at a different time and talk in more detail. But there are flower beds that I've put in here that I'm assuming will be supported if they're in fact put into effect. I'm suggesting perennials, minimal care of flowers, but things like cone flowers or daisies or peonies or astilbe or that kind of native flowers that require somewhat less care than other varieties. And as far as the irrigation is concerned, I mentioned that initially there's water to this site. As you know, the water main runs along Parallel Street. There is water to the site presently. The Johnson Tree people had indicated to me that there would be the need to have water on the location of the main trees that we're talking about prior to the actual placement of the tree itself. So you would need to do some hand watering. I say hand watering because the irrigation is not scheduled until a later phase. But in terms of actual timing, if everything falls into place, the irrigation would fall roughly at the same time as the planting, but would follow the planting. So initially, we'd need to use the water that's on the site, the hose that to keep the potential areas for the tree locations saturated ahead of the actual planting. And then once they're planted, until the irrigation is installed, the only recourse is to hand water. That's something I'm more than willing to do at this point, and I'm sure I can get volunteers to do that if the garden club, I can appreciate it. And I wouldn't expect the garden club to be out there hand watering.
Well, we're there anyway, and we now have the luxury of not having to water very much because the irrigation system's doing it. So it actually might come at a good time for us to have some spare time to do it. So I think we can manage that, but I just wanted to be clear.
I appreciate that. And but to answer, I guess, finally, once the irrigation is installed, part of this phased in project, that water irrigation system would suffice to keep the trees sufficiently watered during the development of the trees. And of course, once they're in place, then natural causes take over and access to the subterranean water through the root systems and so forth. But the proposed irrigation would be sufficient to provide, so that the hand watering would only be a preliminary first a month or two requirement.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to want to move us along in just a few minutes, but my question to you, Sally, is I think the purpose of a meeting like this is to raise any issues, such as irrigation, such as plant species. All right, let me hold on. Janet, go ahead.
I just had a question about, I can't remember since I haven't been on the site in a few weeks, how this piece of property interacts with the neighbor to the north.
Yeah.
I forget his name, but depending on, it looks like there's just grass at the edge of this property to the north, right? You got two existing trees on the left and like a whole thing of lawn north of the building, north of the picnic tables that you have in there. So would we consider maybe planting some kind of hedge barrier or arborvitae or something that goes tall enough to block out the view and provide property for both him and us? He's been a pretty good neighbor, so make sure we don't do anything that would spoil that relationship.
Yeah.
Just a thought to consider.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. I have talked with Brian Murphy. I know was active in the original placement and the whole development of the site. He's obviously interested as a neighbor. He does have along his border a stockade type fence that separates the property. It's his fence, but it borders the property line of the pole barn site. The plan that I have is, obviously it's Brian's fence, so that'll stay, but I was thinking of having a fence line of similar nature run along the property along Forest Street to provide a little element of privacy there, and and reducing some street noise and so forth. And there are arborvitae along that, running sort of parallel along Forest Street behind on the Kroll Barn side of the stockade fence. So the effect would be to actually have a continuous stockade fence between the two parcels.
Okay, thank you. Sally, I want to get back to you with my question, which is I want to have contact with the Garden Club. Are you the best contact person, or is there someone else in terms of making sure we're responding to any of your questions?
No, yeah, you would contact me.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
one other question just before we move on. As far as the plants, purchasing the plants, obviously we'd want to, participate, but we probably can't afford to do all of them out of our treasury because we're on a real budget because of this no fundraiser year. So I just wanted to, make sure that there's not an assumption that the Garden Club is going to purchase the plants entirely.
I appreciate that, Sally, and certainly that wasn't the case. I was assuming the planning board would be a source really of guidance, suggesting plant varieties and approach. What I had in mind was a low knee wall, which is expressed here, and behind the knee wall, I was thinking of a somewhat raised, not really a raised garden in the sense that one side of it would be like railroad ties or something, because the slope of the land there is such that with the topsoil being, the new topsoil being brought in for the seeding, that area could be sort of graded up, maybe halfway up that wall, so that the plantings would be behind the wall, and then along the proposed brick walk to the barn itself from the parking lot. I've suggested flower beds on each side, and those would be level with the brick walk. But the varieties and plantings and care for that, whatever the Garden Club is able to offer, I'm very grateful for any
Okay.
guidance you
We
will
can
have.
certainly work that out. And we're
Yeah.
very interested in being part of it.
Let me
Thank
ask at this point, let's see, Sandy, Deb, Peg, any of you have any questions or comments at this point in time?
About the lawn, are we talking, we've always, went back and forth about a lawn area, we don't want
Peg, Peg, hold on. There's a feedback problem.
Yeah, I couldn't hear all of what you said, Peggy, but I talked with Link, and I mean, this is a town property, and either between my former role as chairman of the cemetery commission or in my activity with this effort, Link has always been a strong supporter, and I'm sure through, I mean, the plan is that his crew will maintain in terms of cutting the grass and dealing with any properties in a normal sense of any town maintained area. This hopefully will require mowing, which right now there's not a blade of grass on the property that really requires any kind of attention. So, but he's that's part of the town function. I mean, I can tie that down, but that's what we've talked about, and it maintains all of the properties of the town. This would be part of that role.
I have no interest in having a lawn like the 10th tee at Eastwood Ho. But something more natural, because we've tried to keep it as natural as possible. And lawns back then, when, the barn was in operation at its original site, lawns weren't considered that important. I'm not being very clear, but anybody else get what I'm trying to say?
Yes,
Hey,
what is known as the Cape Cod lawn here, rather than an English manor look.
Okay, let me jump back in. I think a number of questions have been raised. And what I would like to do, Paul, I would like to summarize what I think has been said at this meeting, just for you to make sure you're thinking about. I would like to put this back on the agenda for our next meeting, which will probably be in April. And I think, Paul, you and I should both coordinate with Joe Powers to make sure that we've got that base covered. And I guess I would just like to caution that at this point, any planting of trees or other landscape items should wait until we have a plan that we're all comfortable with.
Well, that's perfect. It makes perfect sense, and it's the approach that I was planning anyway. None of this, the only issues that sort of are out front are the issue about reserving or keeping available the potential trees for planting, and the farm. I mean, they may have the trees in the fall if we have raised the money and we're ready to go and everybody's on board. But they may not. They can't guarantee that. And the way that they can be assured is to make this deposit, as I say. Whether the deposit is refundable or not, I don't know. I assume it would be, or at least in part refundable. But it's money that I was prepared to cover, but I was hoping to use it as part of fundraising efforts and to cover that cost. So since I was trying to run everything through the society, it was my hope that I might be able to draw on the society funds to initially provide this deposit, but I would provide a personal check to the society so that if, for example, the project came to a total halt or I dropped dead or whatever happened, to prevent anything from going ahead, the society could simply cash my check, and they're not going to be out one nickel. If you want to tack on interest to borrow money from the Payne Fund for this purpose, that's understandable. But I'm not interested in placing any of those funds in jeopardy. But this was an approach that I thought made sense. But no work, I can guarantee you, none of this, and even this phase, it talks about things not occurring until well into the latter part of the summer is sort of the first, what I would envision to be the first steps taken. So
Okay,
the
Paul,
area, one more year of Cape Cod lawn, or
Paul, let me jump in. I'm seeing hands first from Linda and then I think from Sandy. So Linda, go ahead.
yeah.
Thank you, David. I just wanted to make it clear to this board that the Harwich Historical Society Board, and I am the treasurer, we have not voted to front money or to do running anything through the society's books. Yes, Paul and I had a discussion. It is acceptable under IRS rules to function as a fiduciary, but we have not voted to take that step, and that probably won't happen until our next meeting. And I'd also like to have a quick I will probably have a quick conversation with our town finance director just to make sure that this is all okay with the town. So just to say that, David.
Okay, thank you, Linda. And Sandy?
Yeah, Paul, thank you. That's a lot of work, and just the visuals of it are appealing in my head, so keep it going. But my question in the meantime on fundraising, is it possible as you go along to identify buckets of funding, maybe that if somebody were interested in giving money for a particular part of this, like plants for the garden club or some other piece? In other words, sort of estimates of what various components cost, so that if somebody's asking to donate or interested in donating, they might be able to say, well, look, I'm going to give you a check for $500. Do I give it to the garden club for plants, or you follow me?
I'm sorry, it was sort of muffled, the audio, and I'm not sure. You're asking about specific costs of some of these steps?
Yes. In other words, to break them out so that somebody might want to just say, I want to give the money to do this part of it.
Yes. Obviously, in terms of fundraising, I'm hoping to go to people or get word out that we're interested in support. I'm hoping to get some sort of in-kind donations from entities that could do work at the site and potentially provide it at a reduced rate because of the town public nature of the work and maybe this advertising benefit they'll receive from it. But more significantly, I expect to go to people and say, would you be willing to, and I've already had 3 or 4 people make mention to me that they would be more than happy to financially support trees in memory of former members of the society or their own family members and so forth, in terms of maybe a small plaque that would go on the tree itself or whatever to indicate that this was a donation of the Wiley family or whatever. So I do anticipate some donations for that, with that sort of step in mind. I have received some estimates and proposals that kind of indicate some general. For example, one of the most expensive effort in this whole project in terms of the phases is really the purchase and the care for and the installation of the trees in proper form so that they will in fact grow. And that they will run about $8,000 for 3 specimen foliage, fast growing sort of varieties. I'm looking at a beech, a linden, and a sweet gum, all native trees of the area, and that do well in these soils, and guaranteed by a Johnson tree. But actually it's the preparation and the getting of the getting the tree to the site that's almost, in all cases, more expensive than the purchase of the tree itself. But the total installation of a beech tree, for example, is going to be around $2,500 a copy. So, and the same for the linden and the same for the sweet gum. So,
Paul, I'm gonna interrupt again. We do need to move on. I think I did see one more hand from Janet. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
one quick comment. Back when Sidney Brooks built the Brooks Academy building, he had a plan for an arboretum and for gardens, and with lists of what plants he thought would suit. So I know that list exists somewhere in the museum. You might want to consider that for the smaller plantings, for the flowers and things. Just keep in mind that it is there. It'd be nice
Thank you, Janet.
to do what Sidney wanted.
I'm sorry, Janet. Thank you. Peg, go ahead.
Quickly, have we determined that this board is the approving authority, so to speak, of what goes on over there, at the barn in conjunction with the town administrator, or?
My determination, unless somebody indicates otherwise, is that we are responsible for making a recommendation to the town for anything that happens on the Brooks Museum property and the Crowell Barn property. We are now, under the latest agreement, responsible for both. We then are responsible to the Board of Selectmen. They can choose to be involved in full or in part, depending on how much they want to leave to their administrator. And that's where I believe we stand.
Okay, thank you.
So, Paul, I would like to thank you very much. I am going to be sending you a follow-up email, and I will, at the moment, plan to have you on at our next agenda. So we are going to move on. Enjoy your time in Arizona. I'm sorry, in New Mexico. And okay, one more housekeeping thing. I think most of you have gotten very proficient at muting and unmuting. For a couple of you, there should be a little green microphone that you can see. And if you click on that, it'll turn red. And if you click on it again, it'll turn back to green. And if you can't find it, just keep on the quiet side, that's all. Okay, so with that little note, report from Commission Chair, CPC article, preparation for town meeting. I think you're all aware that we've done very well with CPC. We've got an article of over $1 million that's scheduled to go to town meeting. I was joking for a while, but I can joke no longer, that we were getting this huge amount of money without any opposition whatsoever. That's no longer the case. A number of concerns, and I think this is fully appropriate for a town to question a project of this size. The most serious and significant concerns have come from the Finance Committee Chair, John Chory. Thank you. I always blank out on names in the middle of meetings. There is a Finance Committee meeting tomorrow evening. I believe it's at 6:30. I've been asked to present. I also see that I'm at least 4th or 5th on the agenda, so it won't actually be 6:30. It'll be quite a bit later. But if anyone's interested, tune in to channel 18 and, well, actually not during the meeting. Tune in to GoTo meeting and come join the fun. John has toured the site. He met with myself and with, oh, there I go again, with our museum director. Yeah, I know. Apologize for me. And I think I remember my own name at the moment, but I'm not sure. And I think he had some good questions and we gave some answers. There's more to be answered. So we're in the process of dealing with that. Town meeting, I believe, will have a short delay. They're going through that now. So as soon as we get the details of that, we will want to present to town meeting. The CPC does not, they recommend the money, but the defense of the project has to be by our commission. I've got a couple ideas on that, which I'm not going to fully get into right now, but we'll have to be ready for that meeting. Okay, any comments about the CPC article?
Just as far as the FinCom goes, is there massive opposition or?
That I will find out tomorrow night.
Okay.
However, when the chair asks to see, goes down to the basement and throws up hands in horror at the mechanicals and the electrical and so forth, and feels that things are not up to code, you know, we have to have answers for that. Sean Libby has assured me that things have been inspected, and even though it looks like a jumble of a bit of a mess, that things are up to code. But once we do the basement foundation, some things may have to be changed. I don't have all those answers. So that's one very good set of questions, and we'll see.
Okay.
Grant applications. We have not, our first grant was submitted in January for the Cultural Council. We will not get a response from that until May. The second grant for the Historic Commission is due in a week and a half, and we've got an issue with that. What I did not realize until too late in the game was that any grant from the Massachusetts Historical Commission requires a preservation agreement to be placed on the property, which is probably fine, but it does require action by the Board of Selectmen, and there has not been enough time for me to take care of that. We probably will not be submitting this round, and I'm disappointed that I did not flag this sooner, but we will probably not be submitting to Historic for this round. The maximum grant that would have been $100,000. The cultural one is quite a bit more. And I'm advised that even at the $100,000, most of their recent grants have been for $75,000. So I didn't think it was worth pushing ahead for that amount of money, given the uncertainty of whether there would be any issues with the preservation agreement. I don't think there would be, but I don't think I left enough time for that to be done. Moving along, if I can find it. All right, this is obviously a pretty big item. This capital plan, I believe I've sent out to everybody. I figure the best way to have the town accept $1.1 million is to scare them with $2.5 million and say, we're only asking for 1.1.
Good strategy.
What this does is take what we have to do, which is the foundation, what we want to do, which is the additional basement excavation, which we also have to do, which is dealing with the lead abatement and the roof, and which we want to do, which is the elevator and finishing as much space as we can for storage. I think we have the bones of a very good plan for keeping that building up. And I debate whether I want to start any presentation at town meeting with a photo of the Exchange building and saying this is what we want to make sure it does not happen. But I think we have a plan that both keeps that building going, a very important building in town, and also improves certain things such as storage and accessibility that will continue good use of this building for some time to come. It's expensive. We have recent reports from an architect and from an engineer which provide a base for a lot of these costs. They're very, very rough at this point. And it doesn't even, this $2.5 million doesn't even include everything we could do, such as dealing with the historic windows to make them functional again. Right now, I think adding up to $2.5 million is quite enough. There's one big hole, and I've decided to ask for help. When we got the structural engineer, I wasn't able to get the town administration to do that because of other things that they were doing. So I was able to get outside help, in this case from the Cape Cod Commission, who had a very good recommendation, who has now turned into a structural engineer that has done a very good product, and I hope will be the engineer for the next step. The other big ticket item that we do not have a handle on is lead abatement. The only example we have is the procedure that was done for the library, and several people around town are not convinced that that was done in the best way possible, that there may have been some other answers. I know people in town who've dealt with the lead paint issue by replacing all their siding. I got a feeling that's not the right answer here either. That way you don't have to scrape it all off, you just take it off and put up new ones. But if any of you know anyone who's dealt with the lead abatement issue in dealing with any older building, and if you know of anyone out there who does this type of work, we got to do some serious looking, probably before town meeting, to get some better answers on this. So that's where we stand with the capital plan, and I'm going to stop for a minute and see what anyone has to say.
This is Debbie. This is just probably a editorial comment, but since COVID has hit, and I'm talking from personal experience, unfortunately, construction and repair prices have skyrocketed. So depending when we got these estimates, we're probably still way, way too low. For example, if anyone has gone out and bought a 2x4 last June, that cost a couple bucks a foot. They are now costing $8 a foot. I guess I'm just throwing that out there to hopefully the sooner we can get some of these things done, the better, because construction prices have just gone out of this world.
Maybe actually that's an argument for waiting for some of this to blow over.
True.
I don't have a very good crystal ball on it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
David,
that's a very good point you raised. Thank you. Go ahead.
I've had a couple of occasions to talk to John Shorey, and one of the things that he's particularly targeting, I guess if you want, in his concerns is this whole idea of a capital plan and what the cost of everything will be over however many years that we would anticipate making a lot of these improvements. So I think when I saw this is a really good start. I'm not sure it's going to be good enough for him. But the more we can add to and flesh this out, I think the less pushback we're going to get from him.
Well, what I think the main thing that this board can weigh in on is this commission, what else should be on that list. In terms of cost and timing, I have tried to get more out of Sean Libby as the lead, and he's being pulled in a lot of different directions, so there's only so much he's been able to help me with. I do believe we should have more of a list than this prior to town meeting. And the biggest hole is the lead abatement.
David, are you looking for names of companies or what have you to get estimates, or?
I'm looking for anyone who's had experience with lead abatement, how they've gone about it, and who they've used. Yes, specific names would be helpful. And you don't have to give them to me right now, but if you have any ideas, just send me an email.
Yeah, no, the only thing, the only experience I've had with lead abatement was people looking for, when they rent their houses, if they needed to have a lead paint inspection. There was a company in Sandwich, I know, that did that sort of work. Don't ask me for the name because this was like 3 years ago. So
Yeah, well, that's the sort of thing that if you get any more information on that one or any others, that's the sort of thing I could start tracking down.
okay.
Maybe check around with other museums or churches, anybody who has a building that's old enough that we know has been restored recently.
Oh, who I know they've had experience with it is Judy Ford for, the South Howard Meeting House.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
As far as lead abatement goes, I think they got surprised, so to speak,
No, but that's a good example I did not think of. That's a very helpful.
Chatham might have had experience with it too when they did their refurbishing.
Good. Okay, so that's, no, I've got one other part of that on the capital plan. David Nixon of the chair of CPC has suggested that once we get a better handle on how much of this we have, is that CPC, and they held a hearing on this, should bond for it. So if we identify $2.5 million worth of projects, that they should go ahead and bond it and then get all the money up front, and their interest cost to the town would be relatively low. I don't know if there's going to be much stomach to do that, but I think it's again, somebody taking initiative and trying to get an answer. Let's run with it and see how far we get. So I'll be continuing those conversations with him and his group.
So this
Okay,
would
I think
be,
we're ready to move.
for the slow learner here, this would be for submitting to the town for, to get on the town's capital plan. Am I correct? Okay.
I think so. And the source of money would be CPC. And if we can land any outside grants, which I've not done as well as I had hoped so far, but hopefully we will still be able to chase those down.
One of the things that John Chory did say to me in the context of all of this was that he would sooner see us ask for all the money we think we're going to need up front to do all the things we need to do and bond it. And it kind of set my hair on fire at the time, but it does play into this conversation. So maybe that's something he would want to be involved in the conversation about too.
Well, I think that would be very appropriate. Well, that's where the CPC chair is going. So let's do that. Okay.
Oh, just quickly, one last thing. How far out does the capital plan go now?
5
How many
years.
years, we got on this year, waiting 9 years for a spot, or?
Eddie, go ahead.
5 years. There is an article coming into town meeting because there was a little bit of confusion over, this is a charter-driven plan.
Yeah,
And there was a little confusion. The charter was amended 2 years ago over whether the effect of the action at town meeting was for a 5-year or a 7-year plan.
yeah,
So they're coming back in with an amendment this year to clarify that it's a 5-year plan. So that's it.
yeah, because trying to put money, trying to put dollar values more than 5, trying to put dollar value on a project a year out now is.
It's just a plan. And you get your place on the plan and it moves up year to year. You're not locked into whatever number it is that you have because you can't know that, as you say.
Yeah,
But in order for it to come before town meeting, it has to move up that plan year over year, unless there's some overriding need to change the order of what's already been passed. And town meeting can do that, but it takes a larger vote to do it. So once you get on the plan, you can expect all things being equal to kind of just move along the timeline. That help?
yeah, no, I would just hate to get locked into a figure. And then
Oh.
have them come back and say, nah.
Money comes from an article in the year, whatever the current year of the plan is, then you go through the articles to vote the money. The plan is just that, it's a plan.
There's no way to get an exact handle on costs now, but you make your best guess,
No,
and then you
there's-
make revisions as needed. And unfortunately, those revisions usually go up.
Always.
Okay. Report from the museum director. Marie, is she there with you, Peg?
Yes, she is.
Thanks. All right. So I'm gonna unmask briefly. Okay, so we are tentatively planning to open Brooks Academy and the Kroll Barn on June 24th, and we hope to remain open through October. The hours are going to be Thursday 3 to 6 p.m. to coincide with the farmers market, and Friday and Saturday 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. The exhibits that we have is we're doing a new CD Cahoon exhibit, a little bit on the Mayflower 400th anniversary, which was supposed to be last year. We do have Harwich Goes to School upstairs that we're going to finish off a little bit, and of course our cranberry exhibit. The Kroll Barn will have a new exhibit featuring recently donated items from Ted Harmon and Joe Ellis, including a complete set of 25 Kroll waterfowl miniatures. So that's going to be heavy in the press releases once we are confident that we are going to be able to open. We have enough volunteers to work everything. Programs this year are going to include walking tours and outdoor events, making use of the portable audio system to be purchased with funding from the Harwich Cultural Council grant and the Cape Cod 5 donation. Right now, we have enough to purchase 10 headsets and 1 transmitter, meaning 1 tour guide and 10 participants per program. Ideally, we would have 20 to 30 headsets to not only increase the number of attendees for our programs, but I'd also like to have a few backups because you never know, one headset might not be working correctly one day. I'm exploring some other sources of funding to reach this goal, along with other grants to facilitate virtual programming, such as guest lectures posted through a digital platform. So if you've heard of the Bridge Street grants, that's a new one they're coming out with. You get $500 per program, up to 3 programs per year. The website has recently been updated with new navigation menus to learn about the society, the collections, and the museum, as well as a brand new page for membership and a way to renew and pay dues online, as well as submitting donations online. And that is all from me.
Thank you, Marie.
That's right.
Okay. Would anyone else like to chime in on any topic before we adjourn?
Yes, I
Going
do.
once? Our various guests, etc., have all left. So it's just us. Okay, next month, I was just looking at my calendar. I'm suggesting a meeting on April 14th at 9:30.
I have another engagement at 10, so I may have to leave early.
Okay, I think we can make that work, and I think I'll just put the your report on as an earlier agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, making a note. Janet, unmute, unmute.
All right, forgot about that. I will see you all from Belfast, hopefully,
Good for you.
next month.
Good for you.
Just keep your fingers crossed they let me on the plane.
Oh, dear.
I might have to put you on as an agenda item to give us a full report of what's there. And how many months is that going to be?
I'll be back, unless I decide to emigrate, I'll be back before Christmas,
Okay. Very good.
around Christmas.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we are done for today. So, see you all next time.
Okay,
Thank you, David.
thanks, David. Bye, everybody.